Something's coming. Something dark. I sense it.
This is a new beginning. For some, war. For others, power.
It's been a while. Things have changed. I started hearing whispers about Thrawn's return as heir to the Empire. We have to prepare for the worst. The Jedi fell a long time ago. There aren't many left.
Perhaps it is time to begin again.
Welcome back to the Cinema Club podcast. My name is Christopher Amick, and I will be your host for today's episode of the Cinema Club, which is like a book club, but for movies. Every episode, Nick Leach or myself invite one member of the Cinema Club to be a co-host for the episode who chooses the movie or television show and joins Nick or myself, sometimes both of us at the same time, on the podcast to talk about the film or episode. Today, I do have Mark Evenson with me. And we're going to be diving into the new Disney Plus series, Ahsoka. The first 2 episodes did release this Tuesday. We're recording this on Wednesday evening. That being said, I did want to give a quick spoiler warning because Mark and I are going to be diving into the nitty-gritty details of both of these episodes tonight. And also, before we get any further, I did want to give the platform to you, Mark, to introduce yourself, but then talk about your love of Star Wars. You and I briefly spoke last week about this show specifically, and I was like, hey, are you game to cover it for the next few weeks, assuming that we both enjoyed 2 premiere episodes, and you were down, which is awesome. But this is the first time that we're having you on the podcast, so tell us a little bit about yourself, your love for film, and also love for Star Wars.
Well, Star Wars is easy. I saw Star Wars before it was A New Hope in theater when I was 3 years old. I remember things before 3, but I remember Vader, and I remember how terrifying he was, and I remember the TIE fighter pilots, and I remember just being so amazed by the entire thing. So Star Wars has pretty much been a part of my entire life. I got into cosplaying 10, 12 years ago, and my second real costume was a Sith costume. So I have a very warm spot in my heart for those guys. And I was so thrilled to see a couple of them in Ahsoka. But for me, it's been a part of my life and my culture the entire time. I love the movies because of the costumes and everything that goes into building these movies. Even the bad ones, I love all Star Wars. It's got laser swords. It's got explosions. What else do I need?
I love it. And yeah, I feel like this show specifically is interesting in where it's fitting into Star Wars as a whole, right? Because like you're saying, you saw Star Wars before it was A New Hope. Then you have me as an example, Via, who I never saw the original trilogy in the theater or even the prequels. I never saw those in the theater either.
Wait, how old am I? How old are you?
I know. To compare and contrast our experiences with Star Wars, though, a little bit. This is taking place after...
This is post-Imperial.
6, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's right.
Between 6 and 7. Have Ahsoka Tano, who was Clone Wars, and that's where she existed. She did not exist before the Clone Wars cartoons. Then she made it into Rebels, and of course, Clone Wars happens between episode 2 and 3, and then she's in Rebels, and Rebels is between Solo and A New Hope.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then you have her showing back up in The Mandalorian season 2 and in the Book of Boba Fett. And now
Oh,
she
yeah, yep.
has her own show. So this is happening post-Imperial, but the cartoons were between episode 2 and 3 and between Solo and Rogue One.
Yeah, a lot of history with the one
Yes.
character, which I guess is
Yes.
a unique situation, though, a cool situation, honestly, because I feel like there's at least some pressure in place to do right by the character and do right by the Ahsoka fans as well. Let's just go ahead and dive into it. So, first off, opening crawl. This is a first
Yes.
for the live action Star Wars shows, which is awesome. But it explains why Ahsoka is hunting after Grand Admiral Thrawn, two Dark Force users, Balin Scroll and Shin Hati, track down and free Morgan Elsbeth, who has been imprisoned since her duel with Ahsoka during season 2 of The Mandalorian, like you were referring to, Mark. Meanwhile, Ahsoka investigates a temple, hoping to find a map that leads to Thrawn. A group of HK-87 droids finds her, and a battle ensues, only for the droids to self-destruct and cause an explosion. With the help of Hu Yang, Ahsoka escapes with the map and touches base with Hera about what to do next. So I love the intro crawl, starting out with that aspect, right? Because that's something that is so iconic to Star Wars and something that I give childhood vibes. I don't know if it was the same for you, but seeing that pop up, I was like, oh, wow, this is the Star Wars that I guess we're more accustomed to rather than these Star Wars shows that haven't had that intro crawl.
Okay, so I squeed the entire first episode. My son and I are sitting, my wife is sitting in between us, and we keep pointing things out to each other, and she finally told us to shut up. We were just so excited because there were so many Easter eggs and so many neat things. I don't want to say, welcome to Rebels Season 5. Welcome to Rebels Season 5, the very last in episode, because Rebels was all about Ezra Bridger. We don't know what's happened to him. It started with him, it ended with him. And then there was a teeny tiny little epilogue. And the neat thing about the teeny tiny epilogue is when you look at the end of the second episode, it matches screenshots from the cartoon epilogue and from the end of the second episode. So I know that's skipping ahead a little bit, but it's very exciting that this much care was done. So it is a continuation of that story, right? Just a couple wars happened in between. No big deal. But one fun thing I did want to point out is Skull and Hati, right? That's their names. That's the two not Jedi people we've got running around. And they're a little bit of a import in Norse mythology. They are the wolves that are, I believe it is, the ones that are chasing the sun and moon.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So these names were directly taken out of Norse mythology, and that's the first. They've done a lot of things where they've referenced real world mythology and stuff, but this is definitely the first time they've had two distinct character names added to a Star Wars show. So that's an interesting one. I'm excited to see how this goes out.
Yeah, how that kind of plays into the show. And yeah, like you were referring to, Mark, this does kind of so far feel like a little bit of a season 5 of Rebels. I'll be totally transparent. I have been working my way through the show, and I did finally binge the last season Monday this week.
Oh, dang. Wow.
Yeah, so I was very hyped with the ending of those last 2-3 episodes of that show, how that kind of ends things. Now I understand why people have been really excited for Ahsoka, just because of all these characters coming back. And obviously, like I said, it's been some time since these characters have been revisited.
Yes.
But I thought that was a great finale for the Rebels TV show as a whole. And I feel like chat cheated the system because I jumped in, got through that, and then I was like, all right, perfect. I'm all set for Ahsoka.
Last weekend, I may have watched more than a few episodes of Clone Wars and Rebels, just because Filoni's storytelling is, at this point, I don't want to say the man can do no wrong, but man, he'd have to do something awful because he has created stories consistently that work. And he has somehow managed to keep creating these stories and bringing back these characters. He brought Maul back in. Darth Maul, who died in episode 1, but here he is running around being a terror in Clone Wars. Oh, something happens to him in Clone Wars, and here he is running around being a terror in Rebels, and just a tiny little bit, but he was in Solo. So obviously this guy cares about the show, the characters, and he cares about the stories. And it's really reflected in the fact that he's created so many stories that work so well. And you have so many fans that are so excited. When the character Ahsoka came out, I'm like, really? Why do we have a bratty teenage girl? Man, I was wrong. She is one of the best characters in Star Wars in the last 10, 15 years, maybe more, honestly. And it's been great to see her character go through these massive arcs and now finally to get her own show. It's awesome.
Yeah, I started watching the Clone Wars animated show when that first started coming out when I was a teenager at the time. And so now getting to see her in a non-animated form is pretty cool, but it's also interesting seeing how the character has developed, like you were saying, from that very rebellious character under Anakin to who we have today. So yeah, the whole character journey has been really interesting. The aspect of this character being in so many different TV shows is really interesting. And now she has a whole show titled with her name. So super exciting. And again, I loved the intro crawl, that and the panning to the ship. It just felt very cinematic. Yeah, traditional cinematic, which I was realizing that I really appreciated. And I was instantly hooked on this show too. The first 5 minutes, I don't want to like shit all over the other shows, but it felt like I was saying, like more cinematic in the first 5 minutes than I think all the other Disney Plus shows.
I love The Mandalorian. Yeah. Mandalorian's a space western that's expanded. But yeah, just the shooting on this one, it definitely felt a touch above. It definitely felt like here's a movie crew going, I guess we're going to make episodes feel to the way it was shot.
100%. And I love Andor. That's probably the Star Wars show that I've personally connected with and really enjoyed the most so far. But yeah, even just the first few shots, there were different things I was liking. The blue C-3POs in the beginning. I was like, I don't think I've seen that before. And then we get the introduction of I would categorize them as potentially gray characters because they're not fully evil so far.
So visually, everything is perfect. As a costumer and a cosplayer, oh, wow. Like, I want to do some of these costumes. I've never wanted to do a face character before. Baylan Skoll, I want to do his costume. I think it'll be amazing. I think I could pull it off. It's right up there. Haiti, she's got this crazy look. She just tilts her head a little bit and gets those big eyes. And you're like, oh, she's nuts. Yeah. So they have red sabers. And he says, we are not Jedi. All right. So that implies they're not the good guys. And there's this whole thing where and I apologize for bringing in the great Sith Jedi debate to this. Canonically, there is no gray Jedi. People want there to be gray Jedi because they want their favorite characters to be able to throw lightning bolts, but not become evil. All right. Technically, Ahsoka's not a Jedi, so she could be considered a gray Jedi. And Baylan was a Jedi, so she's not a Jedi anymore. Yeah, they are in a gray area. But man, if you say they're gray Jedi, your comment section is going to be filled with angry fanboys.
I didn't say gray Jedi. I just said gray characters.
Gray characters. Yes.
Which is how I'm viewing them so far, right?
Yeah.
Just from the information, which isn't a whole lot that we've gotten. Like I said, they're not Jedi, but are they Sith necessarily? Let's find out.
I'm really excited to see his backstory and hers. I hope we get any backstory. But to skip ahead a little bit, at the end of the second episode, he says, it'd be a shame to kill Ahsoka. There's so few Jedi left. Sentimentality? No. Truth. It's one of these things. He doesn't want to fight Ahsoka. There might be multiple reasons. Maybe he's afraid he'll lose. Maybe it's his friend's Padawan. Who knows, right?
Right.
But the fact that he's not, I'm going to kill her and show her I'm the best, or I'm going to convert her to the dark side. Yeah, that kind of implies they're not Sith. But running around with red lightsabers implies they are.
Definitely. And like you're saying, I'm really digging both of the characters, but especially the apprentice. And I'm just hoping that they don't do the trope where the bad guy or girl turns good at the ends like they have with a lot of recent Star Wars. I just feel like that's getting played out and predictable at this point. So I'm hoping that we don't go in that direction with this character because I feel like it might happen. We had Reva in Obi-Wan and I was like, man, she was cool as a baddie.
But it is Star Wars.
I know.
Episode 1 through 6. The rise, fall and redemption of Anakin Skywalker. Luke and Leia were just bit players. It was all literally about Anakin and what happened and what changed in his life. There was a character in Clone Wars, Ventress.
Oh, yes.
Ventress and Ahsoka, they go out and have shenanigans, and it's great. And I was very upset that they never did a spinoff on the two of them doing a buddy cop movie or show or whatever. And I'm very sad that Ventress off screen died in a novel, because I wanted to see those two running amok and causing chaos in an Imperial universe. So there's a part of me hoping that Hattie gets her chance at redemption. She's obviously a Force user. She's obviously at least moderately powerful enough. She's been trained a little bit. These guys don't feel like bad guys. They feel like mercenaries. So
Right. And the driving theme for these two characters is power. And especially the Master in this duo seems to be like, hey, once we get Thrawn involved here, we're going to have power beyond belief, right? So that seems to be the main driving force. So I am interested to see, again, how that all plays out in the show. But yeah, I really loved the introduction of both of those characters, with the captain of the ship being like, oh yeah, okay, these guys. I was like cheering it on too, I'm not gonna lie.
Watching the background that people are shooting and one of them gets hit when the blaster bolt goes flying, and you're just like, yeah, we've seen this multiple times. Red lightsaber in the hallway, you're all dead, guys. You're all dead.
All Connors.
Yeah, that opening was outstanding. It was everything I wanted out of a bad guy opening.
Yeah. And then I love the openings with Ahsoka as well. I enjoyed that Ahsoka chooses to open up that underground layer with her two lightsabers with that move where she cuts through the roof. That's something that is a signature tactic / move of hers in the animated shows. I don't know how you feel about this. Do you game at all by chance?
Yeah.
Okay. I casually game, but the whole beginning scene with Ahsoka moving the pillars, it just reminded me of some video game puzzle.
Lara Croft, dude. It was
I was going to say in Uncharted
Lara
or something.
Croft, half Uncharted, half Indiana Jones with somebody with lightsabers. It was a little bit of Fifth Element too in there. If you were looking for it, the decorations, it's a nice homage to all of those things.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I was like, oh, finally. Nice seeing someone else have to solve a puzzle for once, instead of me playing Jedi Fallen Order. I hate puzzles in games, but I enjoyed that aspect of it. But yeah, it did, from a movie aspect, feel like Indiana having that statue situation a little bit.
There was even some of the music, the original music there went my brain. John Williams, he did both scores, Star Wars and Indiana Jones. And obviously you're channeling him as much as they can for these shows. And the music felt just enough Indiana Jones. I got the hint, and that helped make that section feel that way for me.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that aspect.
When she gets the MacGuffin and they escape out, and it's a great lightsaber fight, and it brings back a lot of the good memories of fighting the Magna Guards in the prequels and Clone Wars. And the droids, HK droids, was really pretty well done, but this is pretty much what I expect from Star Wars at this point. I did like that they did the trope that the temple exploded, but it wasn't because they solved the puzzle. It's because they all committed suicide, which is a callback for Mandalorian when IG-114 was going to self-destruct and the Mandalorian keeps telling him not. Now you understand why, because that was a big boom.
Yeah, no, it definitely was. The whole scene with Ahsoka running away and getting away in the ship, it was very cinematic. Again, I keep bringing up that word, but I was like, oh, that's a cinematic Star Wars right there.
Yeah.
And yeah, I wasn't too familiar with these specific droids, but they did remind me of General Grievous's henchman droids with their pole.
These are new. These are new.
Okay.
The weapons are similar, and they use battle droid blasters, but the battle droid blasters were longer than previous times.
Okay.
Costumer. These are the things that catch my eye.
No, that's great.
Do I have
love
that
it.
No, I don't. I need to make that blaster. It's 6 inches longer. So in some ways, they're very familiar because you look at them and you can see, okay, that chest piece looks like armor from that guy. But on the other hand, these are brand new droids that you've never seen before. And while the spears are similar to Magna Guard and they move similar to Magna Guard, they're just enough difference that you can tell 20 odd years has gone by. And I really appreciate that.
The details are great in the show, honestly. And you're appreciating even different details than I am. But I think that showcases that they're doing a great job.
Actually, another one is the ships. Okay.
Okay.
You have the shuttle come in for the Force users. And it's very similar to the one that Palpatine had at the end of episode 3. And it looks a little beat up. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a little worn. You can tell it's been in use for 20 years, right? But then you get Ahsoka's ship, and that is a classic Jedi ship. That first time we see it is in the Clone Wars. And where the heck did she find a Jedi ship after the Imperium in that good a shape, right? But it's a fun thing seeing that you can look at these two ships, and they're not just ships, but you can see wear, and you can see tear, and you can see that some of them have been lovingly cared for, and some of them have been maintained, if you know the difference, right? And that's another thing I really like seeing in the background is that obviously the artists making these digital models, they care. And they're doing a good job because even the ships have personalities. So,
Yeah, that's an aspect I hadn't even thought about, Mark. And even the Republic's uniforms, I was loving those. On Lothal, a celebration is held to celebrate the rebels' role in their liberation. Ryder Azadi, who is played by Clancy Brown, who's reprising his role from Star Wars
Yay!
Rebels, yeah, super cool, leads a celebration and introduces Sabine Wren to speak, but she is nowhere to be found. Skipping the ceremony, Sabine returns home to her Lothcat and watches a hologram message from the late Ezra Bridger. In it, he explains their shared pasts and says she's like a sister to him. What did you think of the intro scene for Sabine? Did you like the alien rock music?
Dude, the music was awesome. I want a
thought it was
speeder
great.
bike. I want a jet bike. Of course I want one. That was her. I don't blame her in the least. She doesn't want to be there. She doesn't want to be remembering. She is running away and not running away from this history, which is a really weird thing. And we've all done this at some point in our life. So it makes her very human off the get-go. The ships, the E-Wings. It's the first time E-Wings have been on screen. That's an old one from a video game and a toy that was never in any of the shows before. So it was great to see the E-Wings, those fighters that came in, and the droid on top. If you look at the head on the R2 unit, it is remarkably similar to the head on the original R2 toy from back in the Dark Age when I was a kid, because it didn't look like R2 yet. It was really kind of funky. So if you look at that R2 droid, its head looks very similar to the old toy. So again, that's a little callback. I appreciate me going, I know where that came from. The bike looked incredible. It looked almost exactly like it did in the show. The actress, I think, it did a very good job overall. And the fact that she's living in Ezra's tower means she's got issues that she is not moving past. And it looks like she's living in his room because his art's still up. His helmet collection is piled all over the place. The Lothcat that he adopted is still there. It really feels like she has literally been frozen in place for about 5 years.
I think it's a great point because I had a similar thought process. It seems like Sabine is just coasting through life, but not living life. Oh, but yeah, that whole intro with her and the alien rock music, it worked really well for me. And yeah, I think it's a great intro to the character for people who haven't watched Rebels, just to get her vibe.
Most of those people are actually based off of characters that were in Rebels. Ryder obviously was. He was very much an important political character. The young man that spoke, I want to say he was in the show too. He was another one.
Okay.
I really appreciate the callbacks and making sure that those characters show up on the screen at all. And yeah, it was a great introduction for Sabine to show that she's just not.
Yeah. She's not engaged with anything seemingly really happening around her. So obviously I binged Rebels, so I might have a different perspective on this than you, Mark, because I'm assuming that you were watching it as it was coming out a bit, at least on a per season basis or every two basis.
I might have rewatched more than once in the last couple of years. Yeah, we'll go with that.
Okay.
But yeah, you binged. You did a ton of episodes in a very time.
Yes. I started it at the beginning of this year, but I would take months off at a time. Mm-hmm. But with referring to Sabine as a sister, I was curious to see what your take on that was, because at least in the first season, he definitely is not viewing her as a sister. But towards the end, it's okay, we're one big happy family-ish. But I wanted to get your take on that.
You don't go to Mandalore and fight a war against the Imperials for your sister. You go to Mandalore and learn how to use a jump pack and meet her family and do all those things because you like her. Yeah, there were so many shipping people that screamed in the universe. I think this is self-protection on his part.
Okay, that's what I was leaning
because you don't want to
towards.
say, I love you and I'm sorry I'm leaving you, because you don't want to do that to the person you love and you're leaving. it's not you, it's me. We all know that's a lie. And that's what my brain is telling me because I'm in utter denial of him seeing her as a sister.
I made note of that because it stood out to me because I'm like, I don't know. But okay. So Sabine and Ahsoka reconnect in part because Ahsoka wants Sabine's help in activating the map. After they reflect on their pasts and Ahsoka's role, or lack thereof, in Sabine becoming a Jedi, Sabine flees with the key herself. While speaking to Hera via hologram, Ahsoka acknowledges that she walked away from her training with Anakin Skywalker just as she walked away from being Sabine's Jedi Master. I was really enjoying that we're getting to dive a little bit into Ahsoka's headspace in these first 2 episodes, especially here. What she's gone through as a survivor is pretty traumatic, to put it lightly. And I think that it's definitely come into play in her relationship with Sabine. And I like that we're getting to explore that a little bit here with this conversation that we're seeing on screen.
Yes, I think it's a very nice, polite intro into that past trauma and shared trauma. The problem is to actually discuss all the crap that happened to Ahsoka. We got to go back to Clone Wars because she was thrown out of the Jedi Order. She was accused of being a separatist infiltrator that had bombed the Jedi Temple. And it turned out that one of her really good friends set her up for it because her friend had grown disillusioned and become a separatist. So she set up Ahsoka to take the blame. And the Jedi Council said, looks like you need to get a lawyer, cowgirl, and walked away. And Anakin was the only one fighting to prove that she was innocent. And it turns out that he saves her. And the Jedi come up and go, gosh, we're sorry about that. You know what? That was your night trial. You're now a Jedi Knight. And she said, no, fuck you, and left. She talked to Anakin and said, this is not where I'm supposed to be. I'm going to go away. And she walked away. She was literally betrayed by the Jedi Order. And that breaks people. And then she went on had shenanigans and adventures and ends up reconnecting with the Jedi Order enough to help them stop Maul. Okay. And then, of course, Order 66 happens, and she has to spend years and years hiding from everybody she's known and loved because they're either dead or dead, right? It's not until Rebels comes out that we find out that she has been in the background, become a spy for the baby rebellion. So again, years and years of not dealing with her trauma, of doing her best to help freedom in the galaxy, and finally reconnecting with a pair of Jedi and an Ezra and helping them on their shenanigans and helping train Ezra. There's a ton of betrayal in there. There's so much. And she ends up running into Vader, figuring out who he is. They have an amazingly epic lightsaber battle. We think she dies. That's how they ended a season, which was horrible.
Oh, great. Yeah.
Filoni showed up to a panel and he said, is Ahsoka alive on his t-shirt with a question mark?
Oh,
and then they did a video thing and he was back on stage and it didn't have the question mark. And half the people didn't catch it. It wasn't until people watching it later went, hey, wait, that caught the fact that he changed his shirt from is Ahsoka alive to is Ahsoka alive, period. But it was a big thing and it was very upsetting and it was great. It's a cartoon and I'm loving it. So everybody in the show is broken to some extent. If you fight in a rebellion, you never come back the same. And she had already had years of being a commander as a teenager, putting lives on the line in war. These people are broke, and it's reflected in the way their relationships fail.
Yeah, and that's very evident between Sabine and Ahsoka. Obviously, they've always been stubborn in their own rights, but yeah, I think that factor that you just spoke to is definitely contributing.
There's also a bit about relationships that happen during horrible things, right? Survivor relationships, where especially partnership relationships, sexual relationships, right? The two people come together, they survive the trauma, they end up spending their lives together, and partway through their life, they find out that what drew them together was the trauma. They don't like this person, or they're not that person they are during the adventure, the excitement, and it breaks them up. And I think you're getting a similar thing with your apprentice, because I think Sabine was trying to fill the position that Ezra should have had in Ahsoka's life. And I think Ahsoka was trying to do her best to bring Sabine into her life and her universe. And I don't think either one of them really wanted to do it. But obviously there was a connection there or it never would have happened.
Yeah. I also wanted to talk about how Obi-Wan Kenobi, Ewan McGregor, and then his wife, Mary Elizabeth, are both Star Wars, because Mary Elizabeth is playing Hera. I have to mention that just to throw it out there, because I thought that was so cool.
She looks good as Hera. She really does.
Liking the
Yeah.
live action depiction. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. It's the way she was piloting in the second episode. Sorry, skipping ahead again. The way she's piloting and arguing back and forth with Chopper. Dude, that was lifted right out of the cartoon, and she hit it
That's
perfectly.
true.
One of the funny things is the costumes were all reproduced. The ships look great. I've mentioned this before. The one thing that caught me, that bothered the hell out of me, the hologram of Ezra. His costume's perfect. His costume looks dumber in real life than it did on the cartoon. We
You're
can talk
not
about
wrong.
those. I will never wear a blue jumpsuit with a white belt. I'm just not that person. I'm not going to wear that costume. It looked great on screen, right? His costume just
It wasn't hitting the same.
was accurate,
Yeah,
right?
they tried.
But it goes
They
to show
gave
you
it a
that
good
no
shot.
matter how good the team is, again, the team's absolutely amazing. I think they're doing everything correct, prop-wise, costume-wise, and CGI-wise. There's some things you can't fix.
Yeah, this brings an interesting point. Obviously, we're seeing a very limited version of Ezra in live action. What are you thinking of that depiction?
It sounds so pessimistic because I'm so optimistic about everything else. They could have done a hell of a lot worse.
Okay, no, that's
And
not a
all,
bad way to look at it. And I guess it is a TBD thing. I was just curious.
So I know that they're going to at least have him in some flashback. They've got to. And I know that they're
Yeah,
going to have
maybe.
Thrawn on screen because we've seen it in the trailers.
Yes.
That might be a flashback. All right.
Mm,
The big point of this entire show is, did Ezra survive? Right. And did Thrawn survive? Did they get to the other galaxy and died within 5 minutes, but they sent a radio signal back, which took forever to get here, which is why people think they're alive. This is the fun of this story. I would expect, though, that if you went into hyperspace for the space between galaxies, which is so stupidly large, I can't even fathom how big that space is. I'm hopeful that we actually see the character alive. I'm not gonna bet on it in any way, shape, or form. I think we'll only see him in flashbacks. Yeah, that's my prediction. I hope I'm wrong.
Okay. My assumption walking in the door was, we're going to see live action Thrawn and Ezra at least in the finale episode in current time, not in a flashback. That was my assumption. So that's interesting that after 2 episodes in, we have different thoughts on that so far.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If they are alive, they're showing up right before the finale or the finale, right? Either they're only doing this for 1 season or they're definitely setting it up for a second.
Which I think they at least were planning before all the strikes to do a 2nd season of Ahsoka. I don't know if you've been following it, but they might now be trying to combo everything into a movie. I won't dive into that too much, but hopefully it continues going on. But yeah, they do seem to have plans to continue this storyline in some way, shape, or form after season 1.
And considering the fact that they managed to do it from Rebels, I have full faith that if they want to continue the story, they will somehow continue the story.
And remind me, when did Rebels wrap up? What year was that?
Started 2014, ended 2018.
Okay, so yeah, it's been a while.
And 5 years.
Yeah.
About the length of time between the Battle of the first Death Star and the second Death Star is about 5 years.
Okay,
Sorry, I'm just
interesting.
a geek on some things.
Let's dive into the episode finale here. So,
yes.
Meanwhile, this goddamn robot's name is going to kill me. David Tennant voicing this robot is awesome, by the way.
Oh, is that David Tennant?
I believe so. I believe it is David Tennant. Yeah, I think he's doing a great job as Hang or Huang. But anyway, David Tennant's robot is analyzing the lightsabers that helped free Morgan from captivity. And while doing so, realizes that one belongs to Balin, who was one of a number of Jedi who disappeared and went into hiding during Order 66. Before Ahsoka can even begin to track down Balin, and Shin shows up on the planet and gets her sights on Sabine. Sabine duels with Shin, and in the final moments of the episode, she gets stabbed. Again, going back to Shin, I really just love her look. Honestly, she even has like a braid, which I was going to ask you, is that typical for a Sith apprentice to have?
The
Is
problem
that more of a
with that is,
Jedi?
how many Sith apprentices have we actually seen on screen? Okay. Count Dooku technically was Sidious's apprentice. You know, he wasn't running around with the braid. Darth Vader obviously didn't have a braid going on.
Maul
Ventress,
didn't have.
Maul didn't. Almost all of them. Dooku and Sidious had hair. Nobody else did, which is cracking me up.
It's funny to think about.
So this is going into speculation on Baylan. I honestly think that he tries to live to Jedi standards, and he's also a realist. The Jedi are dead. The Jedi are gone. And yeah, apparently a couple dozen of them survived, but we're going to ignore that. But as a thing, the Jedi are gone. And I think he ran for years, and he ended up becoming a mercenary for some really rich people that had Imperial influence, which is why he's not dead.
That's kind of my thought process as well. Yeah.
Because they add a third Force wielder, lightsaber guy, and that guy is in Inquisitor armor.
His lightsaber definitely is red. It seems like their lightsabers are more orangish than reddish.
I think Baylan's looks red to me. Shin's looks blood orange. It's
okay.
So here's a funny thing. Darth Vader's lightsaber originally was orange because that's the color that it came out on screen. After the fact, they fixed it so it was red. Okay.
That's awesome.
Just like Luke Skywalker in Return of the Jedi is green because when it was blue, like it originally was, it wasn't showing up on the screen when he was fighting people and Boba Fett. So that's why he has a green lightsaber in those scenes. Okay. Originally, the two color lightsabers, and again, going way back, was orange and blue. And it was a blue-white, and that's all there was.
Wow, that's cool. Okay. I'm learning stuff. This is awesome.
So the color that she has is definitely a blood orange, and that is a lightsaber color you can get if you're a lightsaber person. You can get that color, right? His looked red to me, but I got to be honest, I was looking at his costume more than I was looking at his sword. But hers was definitely orange. As for Sabine, that was a great fight. I like the cat saving her. I like her fighting against the droids and kicking their butts. And on the other hand, if you ain't practiced in 5 years and you get in a sword fight with somebody, you're going to get stabbed. And the fact that she was only stabbed instead of cut in half, we know that getting cut in half is survivable, Maul, but
that's true.
She didn't lose a limb. Her opponent stabbed her and pulled the blade out instead of stabbed her and went, right? It's got to have been so much worse. I think there's going to be rivalry between the apprentices beating each other.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I'm hoping so.
You know that Sabine's going to be coming back going, you stabbed me, I'm going to stab you. If you were any good, I wouldn't have stabbed you. I know this is going to happen. I'm looking forward to it. And I think that was a good fight.
We got lightsabers. Dueling in episode 1 of the series.
Yep.
I'm happy. And yeah, like you were saying, it was definitely showing that Sabine is definitely out of practice. I did feel a little conflicted about surviving a lightsaber thrust through her stomach, though. I was just imagining Qui-Gon Jinn's Force ghost just standing there. What the hell?
All right. The only justification I can have for that is that Sabine's was definitely on her side, right?
Yes.
Qui-Gon's went through the spine. And I'm sure...
I'll roll with it.
And also, Qui-Gon lied there dying for a while because Maul went over and started screwing with the other dude for a bit, right? We don't know how long Obi-Wan was hanging there before he did his ninja flip, high grounded it somehow, and cut Maul in half, right? We don't know how long that was. Sabine was stabbed and medical attention was there within seconds, minutes. She was back in that ship as fast as she could be dragged or force pulled, right? And shoved in the auto dock. So she had immediate medical condition. Vader has lost all 4 of his limbs and has been lit on fire and left for dead next to a volcano slowly cooking. Yeah, it messed him up permanently. He lived, right? He got medical attention.
The medical wonders of Star Wars are up there. Okay, that's true. That's true.
I also think there's a spite level. Vader lived out of pure spite. I'm pretty sure Sabine had a lot of spite going right that moment. That might have been the reason she lived. Maul definitely lived out of spite.
Yeah, and Sabine was still actively defending herself so that Ahsoka could come down and grab her. So I'll roll with that.
One thing which I do want to point out, which I thought was very interesting, she was a Mandalorian her entire life. All of Rebels, except for a very small portion, she fought as a Mandalorian. She carried guns. Her guns were actually kick-ass guns. There is a half a season where she has the Darksaber, and she also has that Force shield, right? Which I love, and hopefully they bring stuff like that back. She grabbed the lightsaber to chase a droid instead of popping on her body armor and grabbing a gun. That indicates a change in her personality and who she identifies as. She no longer sees herself as a Mandalorian. In that episode, she sees herself as a lightsaber Jedi. And I think that's very interesting to put onto what's going to happen in the future.
100%. Not to go on too many bunny trails, but do you collect Funko Pops?
No, I do not. I had to draw the line somewhere in what I collected.
Okay. I collect Funko Pops. I've been trying to slow down, but they did release a bunch for the show. They're going to be releasing more, but the only one of Sabine they have for this show so far is with her guns. They don't have one with her lightsaber, so I'm hopeful that we get one with her lightsaber. Anyway, back to the show though. I really appreciated that. I was going to ask you about this too, Mark. I didn't get the feeling very much that this was shot on a volume stage compared to the vast majority of the other Star Wars Disney Plus shows that we've been getting, right? World felt a lot more
It
lived
felt
in.
sets.
Yes, that's a great way to put it. Especially in The Mandalorian or in Boba Fett, there were scenes where I was like, okay, this is probably shot on the volume stage.
Right. And it's amazing that they can do what they're doing on that stage.
Yes.
I think the volume stage allowed them to do Mandalorian at such a low price point. Disney/LFL had to do it. And then when it was successful, it gave them more money. Andor, the town was huge and there were a ton of shots. And we all know Star Trek hallways can be done 10 different times, so it looked like a different hallway, right?
And Andor was definitely shot on location a lot,
Right.
and you could tell. And that is another point for me for that show, because on the big screen, you can tell.
But I think by them using the volume stage, it allowed them to actually create the shows, get the funding, prove that it was a concept that could be done. And there's still times when it works perfectly fine for what they're doing. The outside temple felt volume, while the inside temple felt like a set. The inside of the ship feels like a set, right? The inside of Ezra's house feels like a set. A lot of the rest of it, it feels volume in a way. But you can tell they're definitely doing real sets for scenes, for repeatable artifacts. If that
Yeah, and that's what I was appreciating, is it wasn't jumping out at me like, okay, we're on the volume stage for 90% of this episode. Okay, cool. And again, we were talking about it a little bit earlier, but it was a slower burn of an episode, but I love that aspect.
a 56-minute long episode when the next one is 40 minutes tells that they went, no, we're not chopping out 60 minutes. Sure, we'll chop out 5 or 6, but they obviously kept more in there for reasons. And I think it served the episode very well.
I totally agree, because this is the gripe I had with Mandalorian season 3. I was watching interviews with Katie Hoffman. There was a lot that they cut out of season 3, even with just her character. And at least from a time perspective, but then also from a fleshed out character perspective, I felt they did a really nice job in episode 1, even having the camera just stay focused on Sabine unlocking that map. That was a longer shot. Yeah, and that was cool to see. It was an extra 30 seconds that might have got shaved off, or even in the beginning with Ahsoka in the underground temple. They definitely could have cut out
they could have
2
chopped
minutes of that.
half easy.
Yeah.
And I think it would have been a waste if they had. Who knows how much they did drop. But I have no complaints about the episode, except for Ezra's costume. That's the only legitimate complaint I have. And I complained because that costume looked like it did in the show, and I thought it was dumb then. Really, I don't feel anything was wasted. I don't feel anything was underserved. And it's really
I agree.
nice.
It was a nice experience. I was like, wow, that was a great episode. I got to watch episode 2 now. My only nitpick was, again, the lightsaber not killing Sabine. You did a great job showcasing different perspective on it, so I appreciate that. But yeah, diving into episode 2, like you said, a little bit of a shorter runtime. I thought it was a good runtime for what they're covering, though. Sabine is quickly revealed to be alive in the second episode, waking up in a hospital and talking with Ahsoka, Huang, the robot, and Hera about the next steps. Although Hera suggests that Ahsoka should make Sabine her Padawan once again, Ahsoka initially refuses, arguing that Sabine is not ready and is struggling to even use the Force.
So there was a line in Rebels where they're trying to teach Sabine how to use the Darksaber, right? And I think it's Ahsoka and Kanan sitting there talking while Ezra's trying to show her how to fight and do some stuff. And the comment made, she's just so Mandalorian, right? And I love the Mandalorian. Guns are my religion. It still cracks me up to this day. They are a people, and they're very adoptive. They bring people, they become part of their clan, their creeds, their families, and they become the people. And that is really cool to see, because you don't see that in a lot of fictional societies, right? She is Mandalorian. And there's a reason there's not a whole lot of Mandalorian Jedi running around. Like, canonically, there's one who's, I can't remember his name. People are going to make fun of me for this. He's the one that made the Darksaber. That then he left the Jedi Order and became the King of Mandalore and whatever shenanigans. And that's why the Darksaber is the sign of the sword for Mandalore. All right. So it says something about the Mandalorians, that as many Mandalorians as have there been, as badass fighters as there have been, they've gone in fights with Jedi. They reinvented flamethrowers to set Jedi on fire. Oh, look, Jedi are stopping our blaster bolts. Here's a shotgun. The Mandalorians are very much a warrior culture. That's not peace and harmony and being in flow with the universe. So it is one of those things where I could see a former Mandalorian having a hard time changing that dramatically, which again, she grabbed her lightsaber, she didn't grab her gun. So it shows that even if it didn't stick this time, the Jedi training is obviously still there, because she didn't see anybody with a lightsaber. Yeah, if somebody has a lightsaber, you grab your lightsaber because your blaster bolts can be reflected. A droid with a gun is a droid with a gun. If you've got a gun, why, right? So
yeah, no, that's true. I'm just going to jump in the next section. Meanwhile, Morgan, Baylan, and Shin meet on Arcania, where the map, stolen from Ahsoka and Sabine, reveals Thrawn's location. Morgan reveals that Thrawn can be found and retrieved from a corner of space and time, no less, thanks to a device known as the Eye of Sion. While Baylan dismisses the universe and multiverse as folktales, Morgan confirms that it's real, and that she can see and hear glimpses of a future where Thrawn returns.
So Morgan is a Night Sister, and they're in the video game, right? There is a Night Sister in the video game. But in general, they're only in a couple episodes in Clone Wars. They practice magic. It is not dark force power. It's not light force power. It's their own green magical energy, right? It allows them to reanimate the dead. It allows them to do all the things you'd expect a force person to do. And the leader of the sect did have the ability to see the future and would chart courses according to her ability to make sure the Night Sisters survived until finally it didn't work. A little surprised that she turned out to be a Night Sister. The fact that she can use magic. Now she's a Night Sister. Of course she can use magic. Hiding in plain sight as an Imperial. Yep. That's what you do. Obviously, it's what worked for Baylan because he found himself a patron and that worked. And I'm sure she did something very similar and eventually rose up to power where she is. Great set. I love seeing the old magical rock thing go on. I think that's one of the best parts about Star Wars is the fact that here's laser bolts, but look, magic. I think that's great.
No, that was a note I had too. I loved that set. Even the coloration of that set was awesome. It was more subdued gray tones, but then you had that subdued scarlet red backgrounds. Yeah, that was probably my favorite set so far that we've had in the show, honestly.
Yes.
Yeah? Okay. Yeah, no, I loved it.
I really liked Ezra's room. I'm not gonna lie. It made me happy seeing it.
Oh, there's so many details in there. Yeah.
All the sets are great so far, but yeah, just aesthetically, the black trees with the red leaves and the grayish black rocks and right over the ocean. So there's that grayish water underneath it. Yeah, it's beautiful. And it very much says, this is not a happy place. This is a sad place. And you find out that it was an outpost of the Nathmar witches. And you're like, oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And I thought it was super cool that we were getting a witch in live action.
So we have her introduced in the Book of Boba Fett, right? Was it the Book of Boba Fett or was it the Mandalorian? Okay. Michael Biehn was the gunslinger. He was outstanding in that episode. Absolutely loved him. She and Ahsoka fight. And I got to say the fight sucks. And then I went back and went, no, Ahsoka's drawing out the fight. I'm justifying this to myself, right? She's drawing out the fight to get the information. She's making it seem like she's getting her butt kicked. So the bad guy monologues, which is what happens. Okay. And then she beats her and takes her really cool spear. And why was a Night Sister this powerful taken like that? There had to have been something reason, because if she was a normal human, the fight makes sense if Ahsoka's trying to make it look like she's struggling. She's a Night Sister. She was playing Ahsoka, which maybe she couldn't find the map. So she put it in Ahsoka's head and let herself get captured to make it seem legitimate. So Ahsoka went and found it. I'm hoping this happens. I'm hoping it's proved out some way. Right now, it's just headcanon, because otherwise, no Night Sister should have gotten her butt kicked that bad. Yeah. It should have been an epic fight.
I think that's a valid
So I was very surprised when it turned out she was a Night Sister because of that fight and because of the way they've been portrayed previously. in the cartoons.
Yeah, because they are pretty powerful in the animated
Yeah,
series.
Ventress was a Night Sister.
That's right. I had forgotten
Okay.
about that. Yeah.
And Darth Maul and Savage Opress were Dathomir. They are related to Night Sisters. There's 3 characters right there that are badasses. But then there's different magic. The ability to sword fight isn't the ability to see into the future. The ability to see into the future and set us up so Ahsoka could find this for her by following a path, that makes sense, right? So that's what
Yeah.
I'm doing in my head.
Okay. I'll go with that. I, again, really am enjoying Baylan and Shin, and especially Shin is definitely the apprentice here. But I like how she voices things, right? So she's like, oh, like, you're a witch? It's the first info dump on her that she's getting. But I just am really enjoying the mystery of both Baylan and Shin's characters. But
I want to know more.
I want to know more.
down.
Yeah.
I am
I'm so intrigued into their storylines. But yeah, I love that whole, not to keep talking about it, but I love that whole set and just what's going on there.
And the costumes and how they looked on it and how they
Yes.
did the special effects. What's her name? The witch. Her outfit is amazing. That red color and all the layers and stuff. But yeah, Shin is very intelligent. There's obviously a good bit of ruthlessness in there. And she's very capable. I could definitely see she would have been an inquisitor on her own if she'd been recruited by the Empire. She's obviously a capable person.
Yeah, definitely. Yes, let's jump into the next part here. So Sabine takes apart one of the HK-87 droids, discovering that its tech is from Australia. Hera and Ahsoka travel to where Morgan's old shipyard is now under Republic control, even though it still employs many of the same ex-Imperial workers. Despite her rank, Hera struggles to get security clearance at the base, which raises suspicion. A fight ensues in the shipyard with Ahsoka dueling another of Morgan's mercenaries. At the same time, Hera and Chopper take the skies, chasing a ship that has a hyperdrive that can activate the Eye of Sion.
So this is where we get back into, we actually see the former Inquisitor fight. God, that was a good fight, right? He had one mook with him that died pretty quick, but it was a good fight. And again, we get our lightsaber battles. This is what we want. The combat with the ex-Imperials is obviously touched on a bit in the last season of Mandalorian, that ex-Imperials are everywhere. And I'm really glad that they did that in the Mandalorian, because I would have had a hard time buying into it if they hadn't spent an episode doing that, right? They comment on the fact that it was greed, but there's a lot of loyalty to the Empire. You don't jump up and point a gun at a general and say, for the Empire, unless you're willing to die for the Empire. So it shows that it's still there. It's still part actively, and they talk about the size of that engine, that it's bigger than any Rebel or any Republic ship needs. It's a big engine.
No, that's a good
very
point.
big
Yeah,
engine.
I forgot about that detail.
And then, of course, Hera chasing after in the shuttle, the Ghost 2, I think it was, and just the argument with Chopper.
I referred to that earlier, but that was classic Chopper.
You know that of all the characters in Rebels, Chopper has the highest body count? Yeah. He has turned the engines off of spaceships and watched them crash and cracked jokes about it. He has knocked other droids and stormtroopers down pits. A lot of my friends call him a murder bot for a reason. I love him. Anything he's in, I'm going to watch. So seeing him so well done and arguing and complaining and, yeah, I'm the best, man, what a great way to do it.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that back and forth with Hera. And again, I love the blue C-3POs. I don't know what the unit's
the red
called.
one.
The red one.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I want to get all these as Funko Pops. It's terrible. I also really loved when Marok ignites that second blade on the two-sided lightsaber. That was so fucking cool. I don't know why. It just is hell yeah. Like every single time that happens, my little Star Wars inner child just screams for joy.
So I got to see episode 1 in theater, right? And we were all having fun and cheering and all that. When he lit that second blade, the screaming from the crowd, man, how cool. Yeah.
No, that's
exactly.
like for sure.
That second blade, and you're just like, oh yeah, it's going to be a good fight now.
Yeah. I just love when it's not instantaneously. So it's an actual surprise for both their opponent, potentially, but then also for me as an audience member, I'm like, ooh, all right. Like you said, it's going to be a good fight now.
Yeah. Nobody incompetent has a dual blade. Obviously, incompetent people get single blades. I'm going to make fun of you for that one, Sabine. But she's not incompetent. But people with dual blade, they just automatically have that I'm a nut job.
Yeah.
Really appreciate that. The only people running around with dual blades is Darth Maul and the Inquisitors in the movies. Video games are a little bit different, but I think that's really cool. That is a them thing. And I like that.
100%. Something else that I really wanted to touch on that I also wanted to maybe have you touch on too, if you want to, was again, I want to keep bringing it up, but Mandalorian Season 3 and Boba Fett, I would say, really struggled with staying on a set storyline. It was jumping around so much in every episode. As a result, for me personally, my personal experience here, I didn't enjoy them as much. It kind of took a while to actually get to the main storyline in those shows, the heart and soul of what was actually going on. Whereas so far, at least in Ahsoka, the experience is very different for me. It genuinely feels like a movie split up into episodes, which, again, in my personal experience, is vastly what I'm preferring in my, at least Star Wars Disney Plus show experiences. And I'm loving that aspect. But I wanted to ask you, in the animated shows, they do jump around quite a bit sometimes. I think that's fine with the animated stuff, but for some reason with the live action series, I really love when it feels like a movie that's just split up. And it's not like, okay, now that we're at the end of episode 2, what's going to happen next week? You and I know already what to expect moving into episode 3 at this point, just because of how episode 2 ended.
I can make an assumption they're going to go to the really cool red and black planet, whatever the heck that is. There's going to be battle there. I think we've even seen footage of the Inquisitor with his dual lightsaber spinning on that planet, if I'm guessing from the trailers. And Ahsoka is going to talk smack to Balin. I'm waiting for him to say, Anakin talks about you all the time, and her to say, he never mentioned you. Trash talking. Comic books. Okay. And I think this is why it picks up on me. Obviously, been reading comics for way too long. They would have a 10-episode arc. Okay. Or 10 comic arc. What do you want to put it? And Monster of the Month, Monster of the Month, Monster of the Month. But during this, there's something build up. And then the last 3 episodes of that arc for the year or whatever, oh, look, Cobra Command built a base in the bottom of the ocean that we just accidentally raised up so they can have their own island, right? I remember that G.I. Joe comic book. And I remember it took months to get to that point. And then it was 3 comics of, oh, dear God, we got to kick them off this island, violence, explosions, and fun. And this, for G.I. Joe's skin, that's the one I read the most at that age. They kept doing these long arcs. Individual stories were individual stories, but then you'd actually have this overall story happening. So I think with a lot of animated stuff, they've adopted that too. Clone Wars is bad. You can have an episode here, and then we have 3 episodes immediately following, but now we're going to go back, and this one actually goes, oh, I know it's season 4. This one actually goes season 1, episode 6. So Clone Wars was a mess. Absolutely love it. I think it's great. There are chronological orders for you to actually watch the shows and to make chronological sense. It's lovely if you do those lists. It makes it a fun story. You didn't really get that as much with Rebels. There was an arc, right? And it steadily kept to that arc, just like the comic books would. They didn't do the jump around that you got in Clone Wars. And I think we're going to have the same thing. We have an arc. We already know we got to go find Thrawn and Ezra, right? And we know that the ship is being built. Is it going to become a hijack show? Is there going to be shenanigans involving stealing the ship? Are we going to try and blow up the ship so the bad guys don't go in front of us? We know this is all happening. They could easily do the next 2-3 episodes on that planet and on that ship and toss in an episode where it's a flashback episode. Okay. The season's going to be what, 6 episodes? I think that's what they said.
I think it's 8.
8. Okay.
So we're a fourth of the way through it already.
There's half the show right there taking care of stealing the ship, fighting on the planet, and a flashback episode. Yeah. And I think it's pretty safe to say these things are going to happen. And I think they're going to build up to that. And the entire goal is the arc. So yes, in that sense, they definitely have an arc. Am I expecting a little bit of scrolling along the way? Yeah, a little bit. But I think they're going to remain focused because they obviously have a beginning, middle, and end that they want to hit.
Yes.
Now, whether that end is going to be this season or next season, I don't know. So I guess we're going to have to see.
It'll be interesting because, that's one of the things I was taking away is like, wow, I really enjoyed just episode 1 ends and episode 2 picks up immediately where that left off. I got us way off track, but let's wrap up with the last little bit of the episodes. Once they do escape, Ahsoka reunites with Sabine, who has cut off her hair and donned her Mandalorian armor once again, ready to go on the adventure that awaits them. You were mentioning this a little bit too at the beginning, Mark, but this scene is nearly a direct recreation of the final scene of Star Wars Rebels, with some minor changes for the live action adaptation that diehard fans like Mark will spot. You were mentioning at the beginning of the episode, Mark. It was really cool getting, especially me watching it on Monday, watching this on Tuesday, getting to see that recreation of the animated finale of
Yes.
Rebels.
Yeah. And one thing I had not realized, Sabine's armor is different than she was wearing through all of Rebels, right?
Okay.
And what she wore was very minimal, right? And what she has at the end of Ahsoka is still a pretty minimal kit, but you can see that it's much closer to what the Mandalorian is wearing, because his is considered post-Imperial. So seeing her in a new kit was awesome. And it wasn't until I was looking at screen grabs from the animated next to the live action that I realized that she was wearing that kit then. She only has it for that epilogue, and that's the only time you see her in that armor. To me, that implies that the post-Imperial style Mandalorian armor was intended 5 years ago. Because if they were drawing that armor, it was approved, which meant they had a reason for that armor. So it's interesting to see her armor now representing much closer to what was used by the Mandalorian versus what it was in the original series. And I really appreciate that. And again, I will always scroll down costuming because they did such an amazing job. Her chopping her hair was great. And I don't know if this is true. I just remember going, oh, wow, it's an actual blade. I think that's the first time I've ever seen anybody use a knife in Star Wars, like an actual knife. Not a vibro axe, not a sword, not a lightsaber, a knife. Which, to geek even farther, the Mandalorian is the first time, the scientist with glasses, that's the first time you've ever had eyeglasses in Star Wars.
Oh, wow. I didn't
It's the
realize that.
very first time, right? Which is great
Cool.
for somebody who wears eyeglasses, because now I can buy a really huge, obnoxious pair of big glasses and have it as part of my costume and not have to wear contacts. And they're making these little changes. They're
Yeah.
adding these little things. And as a costumer and a stupid hardcore fan, obviously, it's neat to see these changes and adaptations and the continuation of the story in the universe. It's not static. It keeps changing and growing, good and
Yeah.
bad. Every episode isn't perfect, but every episode has lightsabers and spaceships blowing stuff up. In all the movies and all the shows, what more can you ask for out of life? So yeah, it's very impressive. The last shots, you can tell, again, a lot of care and a lot of thought was put into this, and they wanted to make it so that you have placed yourself in the story of where it should be timeline-wise. And I really appreciate that. They did a good job.
Oh, yeah. No, like you're saying, the attention to detail was great. And I think it's really cool that you have this whole perspective on the costumes and the guns and all of the accessories. Because, yeah, that's stuff that I honestly don't even really think about. But obviously, you have that eye for it that you're like, oh, that's a new thing, or oh, that's something that harkens back to this character or this show or this movie. That's a whole different lens to be looking at Star Wars with, which is super cool, I think.
Whenever you want to have a discussion on the aesthetic of episode 4 through 6 weapons and where they came from and how they worked and why they look the way they do, man, oh, the choices the designers made. And it was all, okay, what can we get from the prop shops in the UK? And then what do we glue on them to make them not look like World War II guns? The prop making for Star Wars is amazing. The depth they go to is really impressive. And this is how I get a lot of my costumes is I paint and I build weapons for other people because they can do the sewing and I can make the weapons. So this is how I do a lot of my costuming is in trade. And so that's what catches my eye. And I love it. I really appreciate when they do these things because it makes costuming more.
It just is always adding, like I said, just more depth, more things to hopefully tinker with. Yeah. As far as the closing thoughts on the first 2 episodes of the show, like we said, we're already a fourth of the way through the show.
Season, yeah.
Yeah. I shouldn't say this, the show. I should say, hopefully season 1. I think the music is great. I'm loving the slower pace. As we're talking about, it's allowing us to marinate on what's happening, get into the characters' headspace a little bit. It left me wanting more because the story is progressing really nicely, and it isn't making me wondering what the heck next week's episodes will be about. I know it's going to be about these characters continuing, hopefully, this timeline, or you mentioned it, it might be some kind of flashback potentially. Something we haven't talked about, not to go on too many bunny trails, but the potential of Anakin showing up.
We've seen screen footage of him talking in some form, so we know Anakin's going to be in the show at some point. I'm excited.
Me too. I think the main question with that is it going to be like a flashback to Anakin and Ahsoka training? I don't think Ahsoka has talked to Anakin because I think we would have been seeing that. But it is something that I guess would be a possibility. But those are the kind of two possibilities that I've thought about when it comes to how we might see Christian Haydenson's character.
I don't think it'll be a Force ghost. So
Okay.
far, he's only been seen one time as a Force ghost, and there's issues about that because originally it showed an older man, and then they changed it out in the special edition, and I have mixed feelings. Okay, I understand why they did it. I think it was dumb. All right, whatever. Vader was evil. Vader actively participated in genocide. Vader helped keep a horrible, awful person in power while his government raped the galaxy. All right.
Yeah.
I don't think Anakin Skywalker deserves redemption. He might have been saved, might have stopped, but I don't think he gets to be a good guy. I think that boat sailed. The reasons he went evil, I agree with the ideas and everything behind it. I'm fine with that. I'm even fine with somewhat Obi-Wan not killing him the second time and saying, okay, goodbye, Darth, right? Weak, leave it to the kid, paying the sins of your father. That's poor storytelling. But I understand the reasons why he did that, right? I don't want to see him as a Force ghost because that means that all the horrible he's done has been wiped clean. And I don't think he deserves that as a character. And I think it would lessen him as a character. So I hope it'll be a flashback. And I hope that's all it is. But yeah, I could see him trying to do it. But like I said, I don't want to see that because I think that would be lessening of the character.
I think those are really good thoughts. I am leaning towards wanting more of a flashback sequence as well. I think it'd be really cool to see those two characters together in live action as well. The other question for you when it comes to characters in the show is, do you have any theories or thoughts on Marok's character? Big question mark.
We don't know how many Inquisitors there were. Let's just add an Inquisitor. It's the seventh sister. It's the third sister. I think it's a little sloppy writing, honestly, on the games and shows now that are coming out. But I think we need the Inquisitors. We need evil Force users running around to justify how many Jedi apparently lived. So
some balance in there would be good. I think it is a new character as far as the Star Wars universe goes. I also thought it was cool that in episode 2, that whole Star Wars intro they did, they added their helmet.
The beginning of every single one of these episodes, that montage of helmets is different for every single series. And you'll even see Mandalorian bit of variation each series. This one was all Rebel stuff. You don't see R2-D2's face, Chopper's face. So those opening flashes are very much customized for the series. And I really appreciate that. It's fun watching them to see what's different.
I barely caught it, but I thought it was a cool little wink and nod. But yeah, I guess moving forward with the show, I'm really excited about and his character and the nuanced villain type that we're seeing now in Star Wars. So I'm excited to see that. And Thrawn also represents that type of character, I believe, as well. So yeah, I'm really pumped. And I think that episodes 1 and 2 have really set up the rest of the show to hopefully build off of this groundwork and do really well.
There's a relatively recent series of books on Thrawn, which are outstanding. They're very fun. I've enjoyed them. The old books where Thrawn was first introduced, I have mixed feelings on. It's a great series. It involves clones being made out of Luke Skywalker's hand, which is horrifying. Somebody recovered his hand from Bespin and made clones to try and build new people to fight the Republic. They're going way back on stories. A lot of the old stories, you had good ones and then you'd have absolute trash. Okay. But Thrawn was one of those characters from that series that made such an impression, they brought him back for Rebels. And he was so successful in Rebels that they started writing new novels for him and stuff like that. So he's a very interesting character, very neat. I would highly recommend those novels if you like reading the 3 Thrawn novels. I want to say they've come out in the last 5 years, but they're fun. Okay. They're fun. If you want more information on that character, it is available. He knew Anakin and he knew Vader, and he's one of the few people that very likely figured out they were the same person.
Okay. He connected the dots on that one a little bit.
Because he's that smart.
Potentially, at least.
Yeah. Oh, it's implied. He never says, gosh, you must have been Anakin. He went, oh, I used to know a Jedi like that and walked away, kind of a thing. So it's fun. he figured it out without being dumb enough to say it because Vader would have had to kill him.
I'm really excited to hopefully get some screen time with Ron in the next few episodes, I'm hoping. But yeah. Did you have any other closing thoughts by chance, Mark?
Okay, you do this long enough, you get jaded, right? And you have an amazing show and a bad show, and you
Sure.
have amazing movies and bad movies, and it's a mixed bag. So you never want to get your hopes up too high. Man, if this show sucks, I'm going to be crushed. Okay. It's doing so many things that I like. The directing's good. The camera work is good. The characters are outstanding. The costumes and sets. This is what I want in TV. And I hope they don't fuck the pooch. And it's weird having enough emotional investment that I'm actually afraid they're going to disappoint me. And I really hope they don't. And I don't think they will. Again, the Onion seems to have a clue and he does good work. So I'm very hopeful, but I'm excited. I can't wait to see the next episode. I'm really excited. We come back again. I think it's 2 weeks is our plan to talk about 3 and 4. I want to see if our guesses are right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm happy. And I'm already trying to find Balin's shoulder armor and band braces so I can do the costume. That's,
I love it.
which on that note, the actor passed away.
Yes. Ray Stevenson.
Yeah, Ray
Yeah.
Stevenson.
They made that
Yeah,
memoriam note at the end of, of Ray at the end of episode 1. Yeah, so unfortunate. I think he's really well done as far as like writing for his character, but then him actually implementing that on the screen.
And how many lines has he had? A dozen, maybe? And you can actually get a lot of sense of
Right.
who the character is just from his delivery, which is, good acting. They made a very good choice with that actor and the role he's doing. I'm, again, excited to see how the rest of it goes, but I'm very sad this is the last thing I'm going to see him in.
Yeah. I think his character has probably the best lines in the show so far. He has, "We're no Jedi." And then he has, at the very end of episode 2, you were mentioning it earlier. What was the exact quote again?
I want to say it'd be a shame to kill her because there's so few Jedi. And then the witch says sentimentality. And he's like, the truth. And I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Because, Maul would be like, yeah, who you want me to kill? Let's go do it. Right. This guy, obviously, he's got a little bit of coward in him because he survived Order 66. Right. But he's obviously very practical because he knows he's the scariest man in the room 90% of the time. And he uses that. I want to see this character. Again, I'm hoping we get some flashbacks. I hope we get some background on him and his apprentice. I think they're fascinating characters, and I want to know more.
Me too. Yeah, like I said, more of a nuanced villain character, which I just really appreciate. But awesome. With that being said, thank you so much, Mark, for
you.
taking the time. Taking the time to come on here and just talking about Star Wars. I love it. You have so much knowledge, and like I said, our experiences with Star Wars are so much different, and I am really appreciative of that because it's a whole different lens or multiple lenses on this thing that we both love. So at least for me, a really valuable conversation to have. It's fun.
Star Wars, like I said, it's been a part of my entire life. It's a cultural phenomenon. If you talk to people and they say they've never seen Star Wars, you give them the look because everybody's seen Star Wars, right? And I get it's not for everybody. It's sci-fi, right? But it is definitely a part of our culture, and it has been for almost 50 years. I'm always happy to talk about Star Wars. If you ever want to talk about why blaster bolts are green and red, I'd love to talk about that subject. I can scroll on all sorts of dumb stuff on this subject. And costuming. Man, you ever want to talk about costuming, Star Wars is one of the most impressive, consistent shows on costuming and props that I've ever seen. And it's amazing how much effort they put into it. So more than happy to talk about costuming and Star Wars and all that fun stuff.
Awesome. With that, thank you for everybody listening to this episode of the Cinema Club. And if you haven't already, feel free to join the Cinema Club on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/the Cinema Club TCC. And we are also now on YouTube as well at the Cinema Club Podcast. And feel free to always invite more listeners. If you're enjoying what we're doing here, share it with people that you care about that you think would also enjoy it. And if you would be interested in being on the Cinema Club, feel free to email Nick and myself at thecinemaclubtcc@gmail.com. And finally, I did want to share that we are completely supported by you, our listeners. So if you are loving the show and if you are feeling generous, please consider clicking the support button on our website. You can check that out at podcasters.spotify.com patreon.com/pod/show/the cinema club. But thanks again so much. Mark and I will catch you next time for Ahsoka.
Bye.